Well, I'm sure by now you've heard about the rather comically absurd reaction of the National Abortion Rights Action League, NARAL, to this lighthearted commercial for Doritos that was aired during the Super Bowl. The commercial shows a woman having an ultrasound, and the image of the baby is appearing on the screen, and she's kind of, oohing and eyeing. But across the room is her husband, who's kind of absentmindedly eating Doritos, and she upbraids him, for his lack of interest. But then as he chews on the Dorito, the baby in the womb is reacting, and as he moves the Dorito this way, the baby reacts. And he's very amused by this, and so he finally throws the bag across the room, and then the baby decides this is the moment to be born. So you say, a nice, cute, charming, harmless, 1-minute commercial. Well, no, not according to the National Abortion Rights Action League, that was outraged at the way, and here one is tempted to stifle laughter, at the way the commercial humanized the fetus. And of course, you're tempted to say, what do they think was gestating? It was a monkey, it was a rabbit. It's well established, of course, through numerous scientific studies, that even the conceptus, that's to say the newly fertilized egg, has a full complement of human DNA, distinct from both its mother and father. And so you're dealing with a human person from the moment of conception. More to it, at about 20 weeks, infants in the womb can respond to external stimuli, to light and to music and to their mother's voice. And therefore, even though it's obviously being playful and exaggerating things, it's only exaggerating what's in fact the case, that babies in the womb can respond to external stimuli. But see, NARAL has to make this claim that the baby in the womb is not human. Now why? Because they have to guarantee this absolute and universal right to murder a child at any stage of its development. And even press it a little bit. Partial birth abortion, which is perfectly legal in the United States, shows that the child even coming out of the womb can be murdered in cold blood. Press it even further. Look at a lot of states with born alive legislation. Namely, if a child somehow miraculously survives an abortion procedure, the doctor cannot intervene, or the baby can be killed. Now, to defend this criminal absurdity, what do you have to do? You have to say, we're not dealing with a human being. All evidence to the contrary notwithstanding, the desire that this not be a human being trumps the truth of the matter. See, and here, philosophically speaking, is the rub. Let me abstract now from this particular Doritos commercial case and go back to the history of philosophy. There's a very persistent view, and you'll see it from ancient times up to the present time. It's called volunteerism. Volunteerism allows will, voluntas, right, will, to trump intellect. Now you see it on clear display in certain theologians in the Middle Ages who put the hyperstress on the divine will over the divine mind. A very good example is William of Ockham, who distinguished between God's potentia absoluta and God's potentia ordinata. Now what's the distinction? Well, God's potentia absoluta is his complete freedom, his radical freedom to do whatever he wants, where his potentia ordinata, his sort of ordained freedom, is what God has actually done. So Occam speculates that God in fact has made a world in which 2 + 2 = 4. He in fact has made a world in which adultery is a sin, but in his potentia absoluta, God could have done otherwise. He could have made a world in which 2 + 2 = 5, in which adultery is actually a virtue. You see what that is a heightening of the divine will over intellect or truth. Now it's very interesting to me how that late medieval speculation comes up into the modern philosophers. You find forms of voluntarism in a lot of the moderns. Descartes, for example, echoed Occam and said, if God wanted to, God could make 2 + 2 = 5. He just decided it would be 4. Now, somebody who had no truck with this voluntarist nonsense was my great hero, Thomas Aquinas. Thomas insisted that God's will and God's intellect always coincide due to the divine simplicity. Can God do the impossible in his absolute freedom? Thomas said, of course not. because the impossible is a modality of non-being. So to say God can't do the impossible is not to limit God in any way. It's simply to say God's truth and the integrity of his being coincide with his will. Now, somebody who picked this up in very recent times and in a controversial way was Pope Benedict XVI, who of course was a great theologian, well acquainted with the voluntarist view that I was just articulating. In his famous Regensburg address, which generated all kinds of controversy because of the supposedly anti-Muslim element in it. But the real theme of that speech, if you read it, I think it's worth reading again. The real theme was this danger of voluntarism within religion, the elevating of God's will over his mind and over truth. And Ratzinger, Pope Benedict, named it in a number of places, both East and West. He saw it emerging in a fresh and dangerous way in contemporary Islam. And that's what got him in trouble. But the overall point was, whenever this happens, danger will follow. In fact, violence will follow. Why? It's very interesting. Because the minute you say will trumps the truth, then there's no real common ground for us to discuss our religion with each other. If you say, well, truth is what really matters, well, then we can have a good debate, a good argument. But if you say truth is trumped by will, well, then all we got recourse to is our own willful violence to impose our religion on somebody else. The bracketing of truth, the bracketing of reality, the hyper-favoring of will leads in short order to violence. And now I hope you see why I think this Doritos commercial controversy is of some relevance. I think, look at issue after issue. I won't have time to go through it all in detail, but look today, issue after issue. What you see behind it is voluntarism. Something is true because I want it to be true. You make appeal to all kinds of objective truths. Well, who cares? My will trumps the truth. My freedom is more fundamental than the truth. That is a dangerous road. When freedom and truth are read together, now read someone like John Paul II, who is really grounded in Thomas Aquinas. Freedom and truth belong together, and it tempers freedom. When they're disassociated, as they are in all forms of voluntarism, all kinds of dark forces are unleashed.